Okay. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I'll just start with a bit of housekeeping first. So today's session is now being recorded and we will be circulating the recording after the webinar. In the question and answer session, we would like you to use the chat button so to submit your questions, but obviously don't post anything that's commercially sensitive. We'll try to answer as many questions during the Q&A, and we'll start with those that were pre-submitted in advance of this webinar. And it might be a little bit difficult on this topic of hybrids, but please avoid asking very detailed scheme-specific questions. So who's on the webinar? You've got myself, I'm Luke Scott. I'm the Customer Service Manager in the Transmission Interface team. You've also got Elliot Dixon, who's the Major Connections Engineer. And supporting in the question and answer session, you've got Brad Jobson and Martin Hardwick, both commercial managers in the Transmission Interface team, and Haida Hussein, so he's our Connections Business Development Engineer. So today's agenda, this is the third in a series of drop-ins, which we're calling explainers, which provides a lens on specific topics in connections reform. And hybrids is all around schemes with multiple power generating facilities at the same site. And we're also going to give you that opportunity to ask questions at the end. We'll start with a lot of questions that's around hybrids. Please try and keep them to hybrids if you can. We understand that there may be other rounded questions that may come in. We may answer them if we've got time around connections reform in general. So I will now hand you over to Elliot, who will take you through the hybrid detail.
Cheers, Luke. Yeah, so the first thing that I wanted to sort of point out was your first port of call on any sort of query that you have when you're submitting your information for your readiness is the handbook, and for hybrids that's no different. There's a appendix 2 in the hybrid in the handbook gives some very good detail and key principles around how hybrids are treated and how you should submit your evidence based on that. So please go and get yourself a copy of the handbook and make yourself familiar with it prior to making any submissions to any DNOs. So yeah, go and get the handbook. Next slide, please, Luke. So in the handbook, obviously there's a whole load of key principles, and I've tried to pull these out and talk them through with yourselves, just to try and give a high level and put a bit more meat on the bone where I can. So the key principles, the first one is hybrids are going to be managed based on how they interact with the system. Yeah, that means how each technology that you have as part of your hybrid installation interacts with the network it's connecting to, whether that be import and export and whatever technology you have. For each technology in the hybrid project, the contributing capacity will be taken as the lower of the tech or of the project and the installed capacity of the technology type. Yeah, so we've got a good question on that later on what that means, but essentially it is the lower of your installed capacity or the capacity you're seeking access for a transmission. Yeah, whether that be for both technologies or just the one. Yeah. Next key principle, where one or more technologies exceeds the 2035 permitted capacity, that technology element of the hybrid project will not receive a Gate 2 offer. This represents the same treatment as any other project that exceeds the 2035 permitted capacity. So this key principle is referring to the buckets, yeah, and how much capacity is being allocated to each bucket. And if you have a site with multiple technologies and it exceeds that bucket, well, it won't be provided a Gate 2 offer. Yeah. Hybrid projects seeking Gate 2 readiness must do so for each technology type that is part of the facility. This is a very key point. Yeah. If one technology type does not make it into the Gate 2 process, it will not disadvantage the other technology type provided it meets the Gate 2 criteria. So what we're saying here is you've got a hybrid installation, you've got a solar, you've got a battery, you must provide readiness, i.e. submit all your documentation for both the solar and the battery, yeah? And if you see your battery doesn't get through and doesn't receive a Gate 2 offer, that does not disadvantage the solar, which will most likely receive a Gate 2 offer, yeah? Key point to understand. The next one is projects that reduce tech or developer capacity will be liable for cancellation charges in accordance with CUSC. Basically, there's an option for you to reduce your transmission entry capacity as part of your submission of your readiness declaration. You might need to do that if you need to align with how much acreage you have on your site or what have you, or you might just not need to export that level that you originally thought. So you do have the option to reduce. In this case, for hybrids, you could reduce one and not the other. But we're trying to make you aware that if you do reduce your technology, your capacity of that technology, you're going to be liable for a cancellation charge based on that. Yeah. And the last key principle is removal of a technology type from an existing contract is permitted under Code Mod 435, and this is only in the case of hybrid projects. However, note where the user or the applicant requests a reduction in capacity, which is what we've just covered, they'll be liable for a charge. So you can remove a technology from your hybrid site as part of 435, which is this submission we're coming into. And obviously we say the main use of this would be to remove any batteries that you may not need and that you're not confident is going to get through the process from your project. And that is what that is for. Like I say, these key principles, it's all in the handbook. Obviously, please just get yourself up to speed with the handbook when you can before you submit. So next, I want to take you through 2 scenarios that we've got in the handbook, which is just to try and help you understand how they're going to be categorized based on how they interact with the network. So this first scenario, we've got your typical solar PV hybrid. Yeah, you've got solar capability, battery capability. The solar can export, the battery can import and export. And this is what 90% of hybrid schemes that we've seen so far look like. Yeah. So if you were going to submit this one through the readiness declaration, you would need to make sure that your solar and your battery, you provide all evidence required for your readiness for both. And for the solar and the battery, they also need to meet strategic alignment because you're going to be treated as 2 separate technologies and you can operate separately. Yeah. So that is how, in this scenario, that one works. Next one, please, Luke. So the next scenario is a little bit different. So it's still the exact same layout. Yeah. The exact same equipment, technology, all there. The only difference is we've got a change in how it's operating. So once again, you've got a solar that can export and you've got the battery that can export. But the difference here is the battery's being charged by the solar and there's no import requirement from the network it's connecting to. Yeah. So how would you submit this one? Again, you need to provide readiness for the solar and the battery, albeit the battery's not going to be fully used as a battery. The network operators still want to know that it's there and still want to be comfortable that they're aware of all the details around it, hence the requirement for readiness. The difference is because the battery's not important and it's not really acting as a battery as it was in the previous scenario, it won't count into the pots allocated for technology. Yeah. So in this scenario, you'll have a solar PV BESS. Yeah. But once it goes into the pots for dedicated capacity, the only capacity that will be counted in that pot will be the solar. Yeah. That is the big difference. Again, if you want to have a look at this, it's in the handbook, and there's some commentary to take you through that as well. But those are the two differences, and some good examples to familiarize yourself with. And that's it, Luke, on those ones.
Thanks, Elliot. So, as Elliot said before, our customer readiness portal The register declaration form went live on our portal last week on the 20th. So we've started to see some applications through, not all. But this is where you'll be able to submit your information around how your hybrid is performing and whether you want to, in fact, remove part of that battery. So in Elliot's scenario, he talked about solar and BESS. If you know that your BESS is important onto the network and you want to reduce that because you feel that it won't go through the gate 2 or meet that strategic alignment, then you can do so through the customer portal. So on the Northern Power Grid external website, we've got a new website as well. A new website launch looks different. If you go use the search button at the top, press transmission interface page or transmission interface, or even just transmission, it'll come up with our page, and at the bottom we'll have the place where you can then submit or upload your connections reform evidence, as you can see on the screen. And in there you can state you submit the technologies that's on part of your site, whether it be multiple, and then you've got an option further down as part of the capacity reduction to say which part you want to remove, which you would enter 0. So I guess what we're also saying on here is the evidence window is open. Get going, start submitting your evidence and help us to help you, because during this window, and it shuts around the same it shuts the same time as the transmission window, and they haven't set an exact date yet, but they're saying summer of this year. We're thinking more around the end of July. It's on us to carry out an initial check. So whatever evidence you submit, we're just checking to see if that is what it is. It's an option agreement. Yes, it is. Okay, it passes the initial check. But we want to do more. But you've got to help us by submitting your information earlier. And then the earlier you do it, the more chance we'll be able to carry out a detailed check and then tell you if something's wrong, give you feedback, and give you a chance in this window to submit again. So get going. The link's on there as well, straight to the declaration page, if you don't want to go through the external website and the instructions I've just told you about. Okay, so I'll now going into questions. I'll hand over to Brad.
Thanks, Luke. Cheers, everyone. So we'll go into the Q&A now. So please use the chat function to ask a question if you wish to do so. So we'll try to answer as many questions as possible during the session today, starting with the ones that were submitted in advance of today's webinar. If we're out of time, we'll do our best to follow up with all of the individual questions that get put into the chat. So while we will be answering questions during the webinar, the topic's complexity may lead to misunderstandings. Therefore, the formal written responses to the Q&A will be sent out after the webinar. They're going to be the official MPG answers to those questions. Cheers, Luke. If you could move to the next page, we'll start on the first question. Thanks again for this one being submitted, and I'll start the first one. So that first one being, it is not clear how we can declare the installed capacity for DC coupled projects. For an AC coupled project, it is easy as you have to let's say 10 megawatt of solar inverters and 10 megawatt of BESS inverters, which are separate. For a DC coupled project, you have 10 megawatts of installed inverters that supply both BESS and solar panels, so you cannot say how many megawatts is in the solar and how many in the BESS. What happens in this case? Do we provide other information such as the battery capacity in megawatt hours and the solar array panels capacity? So the answer to this question is you need to declare what technologies will interact with the connected network and what capacities, megawatt/MVA, i.e., for example, for your example above, you would say 10 megawatts of BESS and 10 megawatts of solar PV, as they are treated as separate technologies. I'll hand you over to Haider for the second question.
So the second question is, does DNO connection for demand need to register and submit readiness justification? And the answer to that one is demand schemes are out of scope of the CP 2030 action plan. And I think I'll pass to Martin for the last question on that.
Yeah, thank you and good morning. So the last question on the screen here is, if I make changes to my hybrid, such as removing the battery, do I need to send Northern Power Grid updated G99 paperwork and SLD, etc., as well as the Gate 2 to whole queue application and supporting evidence? The answer, as you can see, is yes, definitely send all of the evidence required as part of the Gate 2 process. And for the updated G99 and SLD, this will be fluid. So as you determine which equipment was going to be part of the installation, and that's part of the detailed design. So please keep this up to date with us as it changes, but it doesn't need to be submitted as part of the Gate 2 application. Okay, I think we can go to, is it the next slide, Luke, or are we on to the...
It's back. We're now, I think that's all the pre-submitted questions. So Brad, I don't know if you want to start with them in the chat, please.
Cool. No worries. I'll take the first one. So the first one that landed in the chat is for a hybrid scheme. We followed the Town and Country Planning Act planning consent route as opposed to the DCO planning route, which is the Development Consent Order. How do we get this pre-agreed with MPG? Do we email the transmission interface inbox? Luke, I'll put that question across to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. No, so it's you fill in your customer readiness declaration form, and all of the information there is it can be populated, and you can upload all your evidence. So Town and Country Planning, you'll still have to follow the land route, but the fact that you've got planning will help benefit you when we come to do this strategic alignment. You'll get, if you've got planning and a scheme's just got land, you'll get priority in the queue over somebody who's just got land because you've got your planning. But when you're filling in your customer readiness declaration form, you still have to pick the land route, because planning route is only for DCO, Development Consent Order.
Thanks, Luke. I'll pass you back over to Haida for the next question.
Okay, yep. Next question is, if a hybrid scheme only gets a Gate 2 approval for one of the technologies due to the 2035 capacities for the other technology being full, can the capacity of the technology given Gate 2 approval be increased by the amount of generation that has been refused Gate 2? Elliot, you okay for that one?
Yeah. So this is a good question, obviously, because there's going to be some capacity sort of released as you would look at it. But unfortunately, the answer is no, because if we add the technology from, say, a battery to a solar to increase its capability, then there is an increased impact on the network, which they won't have studied for. And potentially, if we were to just add it on, you could be then detrimentally impacting someone else behind you. So that would have to be managed via a new application and a mod app if that was to be the case. That was to increase one specific technology. Yeah, the removal of your technology you can do via this process. Yeah, I hope that answers it for you.
Yeah, just Haida, before we move on, I think it's worth saying when we're talking about removal, it's part of this one-off exercise. So remember the 435, as they call it, CMP 435, which is the one-off exercise of the existing agreements. So adding that Gate 2, the whole queue, to the existing agreements, we're allowing to reduce. Moving into the new enduring process in CMP 434, so the new windows moving forward, that follows the allowable and disallowable changes rules, which is the NEA guidance, just to make it clear.
Thank you. Martin, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, I've got another question here. So understood that the need to submit separate applications for each technology, but land agreements and planning permissions will be the same. Are we just submitting the overall land rights and planning reference for the hybrid projects twice? Do we have comfort that the minimum acreage calculation will be done appropriately considering the land use? Do we need to do anything to help you understand what land is used for which element?
I can take that. So you're submitting an inquiry form. So for us, when you make an application, you get an inquiry number. If you've got multiple different inquiry numbers, that's different customer readiness declaration submissions. But if it's a hybrid scheme under one inquiry number, under one application, you do that through one customer readiness declaration form. I'll put my teeth back in. So you can state through that one inquiry form how many technologies are on that site, and you can submit the land and planning all part of that one submission.
I'll just come in as well a little bit there. There's also, if you go back to the handbook, yeah, and you look at the red line boundary examples, you can see that there's some good examples in there which show you how you show the different parts of your site. You may have one site that's covering a certain acreage. You may have multiple sites where you're going to put different parts of your hybrid. Yeah, and those examples show you exactly how to lay it out. Parcel 1, X amount of acres. Yeah, and obviously, as long as the installed capacity fits within the minimum acreage, yeah, there'll be no qualms.
I'll take the next one. So the next question is, please can you explain in baby steps how to remove a technology from a hybrid scheme within the portal without incurring cancellation charges? Do you reduce the developer capacity for that technology to 0, or do you do some, apologies, or do you do something different?
Elliot, do you want to take the first part of
Elliot?
the, do you want to take the first part of the cancellation charge, and then we can take the second part of the customer readiness declaration form?
Yeah, so like we said in the slides, you're not going to get a cancellation charge if you remove your battery. Yeah, if you remove it, yeah, you won't get hit with a charge. Yeah, however, if you need to reduce your tech for either part of your scheme, then you're going to be subject to a cancellation charge. Yeah, that is the key part. If you're removing your battery, you're not going to be hit with a charge. Yeah.
So to remove it, on the customer readiness declaration form, for the various sections, the first section is you state, which technology you've got on the site, and it gives you a plus button to add different technologies. So if you've got 3, you can add 3 by hitting the plus button 3 times and adding the technology, stating what the installed capacity is. When you get to the capacity reduction section, it'll already have those technologies in that you've already inputted, and it'll say, do you want to reduce those capacities? If you say yes, if you want to remove the battery, where your battery comes up, where your BESS comes up, you put 0. So telling us you want to totally remove it completely by entering 0. So I hope that was enough baby steps, but as we said, any support with the customer readiness declaration form, at the top of the declaration form, there's an email address where you can email, where you can ask for further support, and the team can contact you.
Thanks, Luke. I'll pass you over to Heidi for the next question.
So next question is, if for a project we want to reduce below the threshold to avoid the gate 2 process and the GSP has no fault level issues, do we only provide the declaration with the reduced capacity in the portal, or will the portal request other documents from us, such as readiness/strategic alignment, etc.?
Ida, would you just, I missed that first part of that, sorry.
Yeah. So if for a project we want to reduce the capacity below the threshold to avoid the gate 2 process, and the GSP's got no fault level issues, do we only provide the declaration with the reduced capacity in the portal, or will the portal request other documents such as readiness, strategic alignment, etc.?
Yeah, so because obviously this is hot off the press with the TIA threshold reduction. So I think it's 2 weeks in, and we've just been working through what the policy is. And what we've come to is, if you're that 5 megawatt and above, so let's say you're a 7 megawatt scheme and you want to reduce with no point of connection changes, so that clear, no point of connection changes, and you want to reduce, you can do so by the portal, but the portal will still ask you to submit your readiness declaration information. So we'll have that on file, because some of that readiness declaration feeds into your milestones, which even though you're now out of connections reform because you're below the threshold, the milestones are still applicable.
Thank you. Martin, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, the next question I think is almost the same. I'm going to read it out just in case there's a subtle difference. So in a hybrid project, if we decide to reduce the BESS capacity from 10 to 5, with the approval of the new regulation, does the BESS now need to go through the transmission impact assessment process?
No. So again, just to answer that question, if you're between, say, let's just say above 5 megawatts and you want to reduce, and you're not changing that point of connection, so i.e. you're happy with the current distribution solution, you can do so via the customer readiness declaration form and put that in there, but you'll also need to submit you'll still need to submit readiness declaration, but you won't go through the transmission. You'll have your distribution solution as it is. If you want to benefit, so if you think, oh, well, I'm going to benefit from a new distribution solution, then that will be a new application into NPG.
Thanks. We'll go to Brad for the next question, I think.
Thanks, Martin. So next question is, if I submit Gate 2 evidence with my BESS as AC coupled / import and export, get a Gate 1 offer for the BESS, but Gate 2 for solar, then I decide to do a DC coupled BESS with no import. Can I do this, or will this count as a disallowable change?
I'll take that one. So basically, in the long and short of it, we're not really bothered if it's AC or DC coupled. Yeah, that's like you have to decide how you're going to run the site. Yeah, in terms of how that affects what happens, you need to decide before you submit, obviously, what your details are and make a submission based on that. If you then fall into Gate 1, then obviously there'll be a chance to resubmit, but you need to make sure, obviously, once again, you know what you're doing. It'll only be a disallowable change if you're going to be detrimentally impacting other people, i.e. you've increased your fault level, yeah, or you've increased your capacity, yeah. That's how it'll flow. It's very much going to be process driven, but I would encourage you to try and decide how you're going to operate the site as soon as you can, ready for this submission.
And I think, Elliot, it's using your examples that you pulled out from the handbook again. Look at the handbook, look at the slides after when we send this out, and determine how your site, your technology are going to be performing.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks both. I'll pass you back over to Hyder.
I think we're more on to more general connections reform questions. So this is the next question is this is a general submission question. Can we submit application now? And then if we get planning permission before the window closes, can we add the declaration that we have consents later?
So we definitely want you to submit now. Like, that's our message today. Like, start submitting your evidence. We want to see it coming in. We want to give you that opportunity to give you the feedback. In terms of evidence missing, so once you hit submit, so once you go all the way through the sections and at the end you hit submit, it closes down for you, like in terms of making the change. The only way you can make the change is if we then reject it. You know, you contact us and say something's wrong and we reject it. So what I would say is start submitting, because you don't have to make the full submission until the end, until you've got that information. So you can start it, start to fill it in, but don't press the final button to go if you feel you want to add something. Or flip that, if you press submit, so you've followed the information, you've submitted all through, and you now feel actually, oh, I've missed something off, I need to submit it again, it's closed. You just contact the team, and the team will provide that information or that opportunity to submit something again.
Thank you. I'll pass on to Martin.
Yeah, ready with the next question. So, Elliot, I think this one's going to come to you. For the case of a hybrid project where a solar receives the Gate 2 offer and the BESS receives a Gate 1, will the Northern Power Grid connection solution consider the future BESS in the design for the solar connection? Or is there a risk that if when the BESS becomes Gate 2, the connection will have to be redesigned?
Yeah, it's an option.
Hold on, Kieran got on mute, mate. There you go. Right. Yes, good question. So, essentially, the distribution solution is what it is at the minute. Yeah, based on the capacity and the contract you have with us. Yeah. So, if you go through the process and the battery receives a Gate 1, yeah, we're still going to build the solution that we in contract to build you for. Yeah. If you want to remove the battery or you reduce the technology, then once we go through the whole process, we might look at making some design changes based on that. But certainly, if we're still in contract with you to deliver a solar and a battery, and we've done a design for that, that is what we will deliver. Yeah. Regardless if your solar's connecting in 2028 and your battery's connecting in 2035. Yeah. That's what we'll deliver.
Thank you. Back to Brad.
Thanks, Martin. I think this is the last question in the chat. And the question is, will MPG accept declarations signed by the director via DocuSign? And I believe the answer is yes.
Well, no, the customer readiness declaration form is designed where the person filling it in who's got the authority from the organisation or is the owner of the organisation, they tick that declaration. So there's a box to tick. There's legal text, as you'd expect, which follows the NESO legal text that says by ticking this box and inputting your name, that is your declaration.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks for clearing that. I'll pass it back to Haida. There's 2 new questions just dropped into the chat.
First one is, where can we find a template for the covering letter signed by the director in case that the director is not the person submitting the evidence in the portal?
Elliot, there isn't a template on the national guidance for that. It's just a case of you as an organisation put an appropriate formal template together, letter together.
Yeah, just a headed letter. This is what's gone on, and it's got to be signed by the director. Yeah, but whoever's submitting it can write it. Yeah, and submit it into the portal. As long as it's all signed by the director, that's fine.
And it's got clear rationale.
Martin,
Okay.
if there's any more?
The last one is a follow-up, Elliot. It's regarding an earlier answer that you gave to BESS switching to DC. Are you saying if a customer wants to switch to DC connected, that they need to resubmit in a future window with that design so Northern Powergrid can assess if it has technical impacts beyond just PV, such as fault level, etc.?
Yeah, no, so all I'm saying there is you have an offer based on the planning data which you have submitted to us at time of application. So the technical solutions based on what that is, yeah? We know, and you know, that as you move through into delivery, you may change the equipment that you're going to install on site in terms of the inverters and everything else that for the solar and the battery, the arrays, all that kind of lovely stuff, yeah? So all that was planning data, and it will be up until your detailed design, yeah? So what I'm saying is all you need to ensure is if you decide whether to go AC coupled, DC coupled, or what you're going to install, you need to stick to those key principles that you don't increase your fault level above what you have in your offer, and you don't increase your import and your export requirements above what you have in your offer, yeah? I hope that clarifies it a bit more. Just if you think in terms of, you know, am I increasing anything? Yeah, then I know I'm on a rocky road. Yeah.
Thanks, Elliot. There's a couple more questions dropping in, so we'll go back to Brad for the next one.
Cheers, Martin. Yeah, thank you for the questions. We've got the next one being, when doing minimum acreage calculations for each technology, I'll put my teeth back in, look, where there are multiple land parcels, should we refer to the overall site boundary we're submitting or the option boundary for which the technology is in? Elliot, I'll hand you that one.
So you basically, if you go back to the handbook, there's some good examples in there. There's examples showing single parcels of land and multiple parcels of land. The coordinates you submit will cover the entire site, as it'll draw a polygon over all of your multiple parcels of land. Yeah, the red line boundary you submit will show each parcel, and you should show how big each parcel is in terms of the acres. Yeah, you can also indicate where each of your technology is going to be installed within those parcels of land. Yeah. Your option agreement and your land rights should also show all of the land for each parcel.
Thanks, Elliot. Haida, I'll pass you over to the next question.
Next question. For a hybrid project with 10 megawatt solar and 5 megawatt BESS, if the BESS is reduced to 4.9 megawatt, will the BESS no longer need to meet the strategic alignment criteria, despite the solar still needing Gate 2?
So we touched on this before on the slides. So you basically still need to submit your evidence for your solar and your battery if it's going to be interacting with the network. Yeah. And obviously you'll do the reduction as part of this process. But as we said, the battery, if you run it as we showed in the example 2 in the handbook, won't be classed as taking up allocation capacity in the pots. Yeah. And as well, if you're dropping it down into below the threshold, it won't be making strategic alignment either.
I think that's it for the questions in the chat.
Haida, I think there's one more. And Brad, do you just want to give everybody an update on current offers that we're waiting back in terms of NESO and the timescales? So for customers who may be waiting their transmission outcome letter, do you just want to give a brief update on where we are with that and the timescales? Look, when we're not going to get that finalised.
Yeah, so we've got the deadline by which we need to sign the BCAs is the 6th of June. We are waiting on 2 offers that we currently haven't got that we're following up with NESO. So I'm triaging that on a day-to-day basis at the moment until we receive them. Look, I think is that in relation to the question at the top for the Keadby offer, the Keadby step 2 offers?
So just for everybody, the bilateral connection agreement, contract agreement, that's the one that we sign with NESO for those offers. So if we're only waiting for 2, there'll be some that'll be sitting with our commercial engineers getting ready and preparing those letters to come out here ready to sign. So like I said, as Brad says, we're hoping to get that done and completed by mid-June. Okay, if there's no more questions, we've got a quick poll, and then after the poll, we'll tell you around some next steps and what's happening after. So, Amalia, are you ready to launch those polls, please? We should see the poll come up in the middle of I think it comes up in the chat. Yeah, they're starting to come through there now. So if you could just please take the time to fill in the polls, give us some feedback, it's much appreciated. And then once we get some good responses, we'll move to next steps. But your feedback's appreciated, so. And Elliot's just put the link to the handbook in there as well in the chat. And like we said, the slides will be getting sent out after. They'll also have all of the links on there as well to the national guidance, the handbook, and also the customer readiness declaration portal. Still going with the chat? Yeah. Okay, well, we're finished off on the chat. I'll just tell you about some next steps and what's happening in terms of communication. So, as you can see on the right-hand side, we've now finished the 3rd of the explainers. The next one is the 10th of June, where we're going to start looking at some of the trends that we're finding on rejection. So, like I said, start submitting your information, get it in there nice and early, so we can feed back on, you know, what possibly wasn't right and how you can get that right. And then we can also cover that off in the next explainer. We've also got the ENA seminar on the 10th of June, which obviously NPG will be down there. So myself and Elliot are down there, which should be a good day, you know, answering questions. There'll be some workshops and a chance to ask further questions. So again, you know, you'll probably have more questions as you start to fill in the customer readiness declaration portal. So please try and do your best to attend there as well. But there's our timetable. So there'll be more comms to come. So what I would like to do then, I would like to say thank you to everybody for joining and for asking those questions. For any issues, please get in touch via the email address on the customer readiness declaration portal, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.